Good morning, everyone. We're here live at 7:45 on a Friday, the day after the Queen Edith's by-election in Cambridge City. So I'm here with Stephen. David might join later as well. And we're going to discuss two things today. The by-election, what happened in Queen Edith's, commenting a bit about the result. And then we're going to look into some of the headlines on the autumn statement and ask the question around how does this autumn statement help or not help local authorities from the perspective of the county council and the district council as well. So as usual, if you have any comments or any other questions you want us to address, we'll be here for like half an hour or so please do add them in the comments so we can respond to you live as well. So Stephen, the Queen Edith's by-election, the result was out at about midnight last night. I was on the doorstep about 9:45 p.m. I came back, so I was actually still on the bus at the time that the result was announced, going back to Huntington. What did you think about this as someone who's I guess I'm not sure if you know the area well or if you've been there before, like.
I I really don't know the area well. I've only ever driven through there with you, I think, when I was dropping you off once. So I'm not. I mean, in terms of Cambridge politics, I'm by no means an expert. But what I did know about Cambridge was about Queen Edith it was where Sam Davis, who was a very prominent and very well respected and very well loved independent, stood. And the reason we're having this by-election is that she's moving to Wales with her family, I think, and decided to stand down as well. And so she commanded a massive vote share. So I think in 2021 she got like 40% of the vote personally as well. And so this was an interesting one, I guess, because we were seeing where those votes were going to be distributed. Was there an independent candidate? I can't see one of the results. So
No, not this time. Actually, in May when we had the usual May elections, actually Anthony Carpen,
yeah,
he stood as independent. So I think I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly the percentage, but yeah, he got quite a few votes in
he
Queen
got
Edith.
10, about less than 99%, I
Yeah.
guess, looking at this graph as well. I love Anthony as well, but I don't think Anthony was ever really seriously hoping to be elected. I think he was making a statement by standing. Anthony's a great, great guy, and I absolutely adore him. But he wasn't. He wasn't. He was never going to be a councillor like Sam Davis is a councillor. So yeah, the question was where the votes were going to go this time. Lib Dems won, didn't they? But it looked like a
Yes.
bit. Was it? You didn't go to the count, did you? Or
No, I had to get the bus back. The last bus back was 11 o'clock. So
did you have any intelligence from the count as well? Was it desperate at all? Because
I
the gap between the Lib Dems and Labour really, really, really got very close, didn't it? So
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the results. I think I was actually personally quite surprised how narrow the difference was. So I mean, if I look at the actual numbers, and we can discuss a bit about like how the vote increased or decreased in each parties, but we had the Liberal Democrat candidate elected with 745. Those are quite low numbers for Cambridge, but it's because it's by-election and the turnout was 32.3%, which actually, for the by-election is actually a very good turnout because some by-elections are won across the UK with like 15% or sometimes even less turnout I've seen, but 32.3% turnout is actually good for a by-election. So the Lib Dem won with 745, and then we have the Labour Party candidate with 678. So that's a difference of 67 votes. But then we have it's really, really interesting how the Conservative Party vote did hold up. So we have 454 votes for the Conservative Party candidate. And then we also have, another interesting question, 252 for the Green candidate. And in terms of campaigning, in terms of who was out on the doorstep, who delivered like lots of leaflets and so on, it was really, I mean, I might be wrong because it's my observation, but it was really Lib Dem and Labour fight in terms of like kind of campaign operations. I mean, probably the other two parties did have some literature as well, but when I was canvassing, for example, I haven't seen groups of Green Party activists in the same way I do see in Abbey or other areas of Cambridge. And I haven't really seen, I have seen like a couple of times the Conservatives go out as well with their candidate, but again, it was not the same, I guess, the same level of resource perhaps that the Lib Dems and Labour put in in terms
Yeah,
of.
and I think that most people expected the Lib Dems to win, didn't they, as well? And so everybody's vote share increased this time. So the Greens went up by 1.6%, Conservatives up by nearly 2%, Labour up by 8%, and Lib Dems down by nearly 3% as well. So,
Yeah.
and it's not like that those were, I would have thought before looking at the graphs, those were like Sam Davies's votes being split up. But of course, because you're electing by thirds, since anybody voted for Sam in 2021, this is the third election in that ward as well, and so kind of that whole fact has disappeared, and people are voting along political lines as well. What was the big message on the doorstep? Was the congestion charge in the STZ still something that was worrying people you spoke to, or has that largely been forgotten?
I mean, personally, was probably there were a few people who are still concerned about this, but I haven't been canvassing a lot in this. Unlike other
Okay.
by-elections, maybe I've been, a couple of sessions. And yesterday I only went like 6 o'clock after work, so I did the evening after work shift in terms of getting out the vote. But I guess there were two main things that really came across for me. Actually, people being, just hearing that Sam Davies is stepping down, and just being very appreciative towards her, and be like, she was a very great counselor, very responsive. So I think there was a bit of like, well, if we can't elect Sam again, I'm not really sure like who to elect, because like our candidate, Labour candidate, stood again from like last time he stood in May as well. But yeah, I guess Sam Davies had such a presence and a name recognition that for a lot of people it was like, well, if I'm not voting for Sam, like who do I vote for? So there was a lot of this kind of persuasion involved. There are of course like those kind of narratives around like, well, if he's not an independent, a popular independent, this is like a kind of a classic Lib Dem territory, which of course people like do argue over, because as the increase in the Labour vote share shows, I think it's interesting to ask what implications it will have for like the South Cambs constituency, for example, because some of the areas like this in Cambridge City will be in the South Cambs boundaries. But then there were like of course a lot of local issues as well, and myself, like I don't know the area well. I haven't lived in Queen Edith's in my time in Cambridge, so there were like a lot of the usual local issues that you'd expect. Of course, the state of the roads, and the like the issues with education, issues with NHS access, and the usual messages that you would expect. And I think that's why like Labour does also like well in some by-elections across the country, because it's about those main things that concern everyone, like the state of the country in general, I guess. um but yeah, the congestion charge is interesting, because I was thinking like, well, the Conservative vote did hold up, so I'm not sure it's because if they put like a lot of canvassing. As I said, like personally, I've only seen them a couple of times out, um or if it's because the congestion charge debate is still a live issue. So I'm not sure what you think
And I
about
guess as we start to get closer to a general election, national politics will start to play into it as well. I mean, I think everybody's a lot more politically aware. So looking at the turnout is 32.3, which by lots of measures people would say was awful. But actually for a cold November by-election results, I think 32% is a relatively decent turnout. Certainly more decent than some of the local elections around here when it was proper election night as well. So maybe the pressure is starting to increase, and people are starting to think ahead, and people are more politically aware as well. So we should say congratulations then to Imogen Blackburn Horgan, who was the Liberal Democrat who was elected. She's got some very big shoes to step into, I think, as well. Let's hope that she can be, if she's even as half as communicative as Sam Davies was with the electorate, she'll be a fantastic councillor. But there's high expectations I expect in that ward as well.
Yeah, one of the questions in the hustings actually in Queen Edith was, well, Sam Davies, like her regular blog, which was very good about all the issues. And then like all the candidates said like, well, they will also do a blog to kind of like follow Sam Davies's work. So it'll be very interesting to see to see like how people can keep up, because it's quite a difficult task to like, write every week, and to write something that's relevant to local government, and have like interesting thoughts on the topic and stick to it like on a weekly basis. So I'm really looking forward to see the new Queen Edith's blog.
I agree. It's a really difficult thing to do. It's something which I'd like to do, but I just don't have the time and resources. But having said that, I did get out of bed at 7:15 this morning to talk to people as well. So we're trying to do our own thing to talk about local politics, but it just involves less typing.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting is actually the green vote, because unlike other areas in Cambridge, it was not a green target. It was not like a lot of green campaigning as such. But it's still, well, a slight increase, but it's 250 odd votes. But even if you think about this in the context of like very little resource comparatively, and no, or very little like kind of doorstep campaigning, it is really interesting because in other elections when you put in a little less effort, you definitely get less than that, just in terms of numbers. And I would say like this is not one of the areas where you normally expect a high green vote, like I don't know, in some of the more central wards or the student wards, or of course in areas like Abbey that have been a green target.
Well, speaking as independent now, we can talk about resources and national parties and having lots of campaigners. But I will make out the point. I expect with not many resources, Sam Davis got 30% of the vote in 2019, over 40% in 2021. So, I mean, it is possible to win these things without massive resources. And it's always really interesting for me as an independent to see how sometimes independents do manage to capture such a massive share of the vote with hardly any resources, because it's what I have to do as well. I mean, I don't have, I pay for my own campaigns. And I don't have the time and energy to be knocking on doors all the time because I've got a full-time job and there's just me normally as well. So people like Sam Davis have really proved that you can do this and can be a councillor without all that kind of party political support as well, and do it in a way which I think nobody else has ever managed to do, with her regular blog and her, her really radiant personality, where she's been on top of all the issues. So yeah, she will be sorely missed, but we've said that enough times now.
I think it's also about like being known before, and I think there's difficult with like party candidates, because often because of how the selection processes work, many people often don't get or can't get selected for whatever reason in the area where they live in and where they have some kind of recognition. So then, like for example, like when I stood in Abbey, which and I'm always open with this, the ballot paper said the address was in South Camps at that point. You get selected in an area as a party candidate where you don't live, and then it's like basically it's not feasible to move. And then of course you can be present, I can still do more campaigning, I can still do like more residence visits than like any other person who is living there, like hypothetically. But it is difficult because you don't start with that recognition, because people don't know you in the area. Whereas I think what really worked for many independents, especially for Sam, is that she was in the area, she was present at community events, she was already writing about local things, she was already doing so much work. And then when you put your name for it, it's like, oh yeah, like it is Stephen, it is Sam, it is someone I recognize.
That's a huge weakness of the party political system as well. And because I think around here, so if you look in St Neots, and in actually, I think in the whole new St Neots in Mid Cams constituency, there are no Labour councillors. And so what happens is that it comes to election time and we have these new people appear on the ballot boxes, on the ballot papers. Typically people don't stand for town councils very often, so there's no opportunity. The way I got into being known as a local politician was I got co-opted onto I was elected opposed onto the town council. But then that's how you make a name for yourself, by doing good work. And I fundamentally think it's a way that political parties who around here where I live have completely, and I guess across the whole of Huntingdonshire actually, there's only 4 Labour councils in the whole of Huntingdonshire at the moment, as compared with like 15 independents. And I think it's because independents, get down. They're usually community organisers or community activists who establish a really great name. And then I think for me, if Labour or the Lib Dems or anybody wants to get involved, it's getting involved in those lower levels of politics and getting people elected and getting local people elected rather than shipping people in, because it just looks inauthentic to me. But that's the way the system works, I guess.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of I guess challenges with the system, but that's I think one advantage that like areas outside Cambridge City have is the fact that you could stand in the areas that have parish councils, for example. Like it's a much more like it's a better in a way like entry point to politics, because you attend, let's say, parish council or town council, you can be like very locally focused in the village you live in, or like where in your area. Whereas in Cambridge City, it's like you have like either stand for district or for county, and they're all competitive and they all have like all parties represented, and it is like a much more, I think it's much more difficult to get selected and then run the campaign. So in a way, like it's bad. I do always encourage people, like especially people who don't live in the city itself, like actually being a parish councillor for like a year or so like is positive. So I know someone, for example, in Fulbourn who is doing that. So that is something that could be then help you to get elected onto onto district, as you say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same thing also happens in national politics as well. If you look at the prospective parliamentary candidate for the Conservatives for Huntingdon, again, he's an outsider who's from London, beat a very popular local Conservative who's established representative, who's what's his name, Simon. Who was the guy who finished second in the
Yeah, I
Conservative?
forgot someone called Simon, but I know he is
Yeah,
from
but
Huntington.
yeah, so that's caused some disquiet, I think, amongst the local party as well. Is that they've gone for a very slick looking outsider rather than somebody who's established their reputation in local politics. I think that happens quite often when you get people just kind of sweeping in as well. So it happens all over.
Yeah, it is. It is the
Exciting times.
structure. It is the structure because ultimately it is a members. It is a members vote. I'm not sure exactly how the Tory selection works, but like, I think in all the main parties, like the end kind of, or whatever you want to call it, shortlist or the end selection of candidates is down to your membership, whether it's the Conservative Association or the Labour Party members of that constituency, or in the case of the Greens and Lib Dems, how they organize their members as well. So you can have a situation where, like, yeah, someone who is from the outside or from London or from even further afield could like appeal more to the members, and ultimately if it's a membership vote, then you go with the candidate that was the first or the second preference, depending on whether you have a preferential voting system or not. And it can happen. I mean, a lot of people come from London to be candidates in our areas, but also the people who come from even further. So it is an interesting system. Okay, shall we move on to the discuss a bit about the local government, the autumn statement and the local government's association response. I mean, the headline is, and that's really, I guess, sobering to reflect on, especially in the morning after the polling day, is that overall local councils across the UK face a budget gap of like about 4 billion combined across the UK. And the question is, like, did this autumn statement address any of this in a meaningful way? And yeah, the local government association, which is cross-party group, so of course you have individual LGA, Labour, Lib Dem, and so on. But the main LGA said that we think today this is a missed. Well, it was yesterday. It is a missed opportunity to address this 4 billion shortfall in local councils. So, do you think they're right to say that?
Yeah, the situation is really desperate, isn't it? I think it really is desperate, and it makes me wonder whether I want to be a councillor sometimes as well, because constantly we're just having to tell people that we can't afford to do things as well. The problem is worse at county council, but at Huntingdonshire we've had to do really unpopular things like introduce a green bin charge. I was going to call it a tax there for a second, but it's not a tax. Because we have to keep the books balanced as well. And the truth is that at Huntingdonshire, the previous administration, I think, in general, ran the administration really well, but they never had a particularly balanced budget. They were always, hoping for more funding. We tried to put the council on more even footing, but all councils everywhere are having to find other income streams or make cuts. And there's nothing in this autumn statement that's going to cause this. There was the previously announced £2.3 million investment in highways and improvements in Cambridgeshire, which sounds like a lot of money on paper, but actually, on operation level, it's next to nothing as well. Like, we've got 4,500 miles of roads in Cambridgeshire, so I'm gonna do that calculation. But 2.3 million divided by 4.5 million, 4,500 isn't a lot per mile of roads. Yeah. So what is it? Oh, it's £500 a mile. It's not bad actually. But I've done that calculation right. So some of the stuff is welcome, but the truth of it is there wasn't much in there for councils, and councils won't understand what our funding is for next year until December the 19th. And so every year we go through this. All councils are in their budget planning process at the moment, but we won't know what we're going to get in April until Christmas, and that's really, really difficult as well. It's difficult to understand. So one of the things I would have liked to have seen is and has been promised to us is like a multi-year financial statement settlement, so we can plan across the next 2 or 3 years, or as we have to do the government, we have to set a balanced budget over like 4 or 5 years, but we don't know what our income from the government's going to be year to year because of Westminster politics, and so that's really difficult. And so I don't think there's a council in the country that doesn't feel it's massively underfunded, isn't having to cut services or find extra income streams. So that there's nothing there that really reassured me. And I think it's somebody put on one of the local social media groups, what thing that you're never going to get would you really like for Christmas? And the thing that came to me was fairer local government funding, because what we do quite often affects people, our residents, much more than what happens in national Westminster politics as well. And I keep saying, but across the last 8 years, HDC's funding has been cut by about 25%, yet we still have to deliver the same statutory services, and quite often we have to take off more statutory services, the ones the county council can't deliver. And that's really, really tough to do. And people say, oh, we can make cuts, but you can only keep making cuts for so long. So yeah, it's desperate for all local councils, and there was nothing here to really reassure me.
How about some of the other highlights? I'm just looking to see what
Tax cuts. Whoa, there's a tax cut stuff. If you look on Twitter, I keep getting adverts for this. I bite on these.
I think you're in the target audience then.
I probably maybe I'm a swing voter. I don't know.
So let's look at the I'm actually looking at the Treasury's Twitter account, because they're saying, okay, this is a video of Jeremy Hunt. Like, I'm not going to watch this 5 minutes video now, but I'm just seeing, the highlights saying, well, the cut to the national insurance, for example. Rishi Sunak is claiming that this is the biggest cut on business investment in British history. So while they're saying this is the Conservative Party, while they're saying, well, cutting tax for 27 million workers and cutting tax for 2 million self-employed and boosting pay for 3 million workers. So I guess a lot of the framing in here is about we won't invest more we don't invest in what public services need. However, we're going to cut the tax so you can basically be better off in that way. So I'm not sure if you have any views on this kind of approach.
So they're cutting national insurance, but in April they put April 2022, which is less than 2 years ago, they put national insurance up by 1.2. Now they're cutting it again. So it's election time.
It's a U-turn in a way. Yeah, the a few months is a long time in politics. People won't remember generally, so I think they're kind of relying on that.
I remember every time I look at my wage slip.
Well, I remember as well, but I think that's the assumption that a lot of time has passed since, so we're reversing that.
So in general, I'm in favour of tax cuts at some level. I think one of the ways which Liz Truss was misunderstood is that, and if you want to get the economy going, you need to give more people more money to spend. So in general, cutting taxes, is a good idea. I know, we just talked about local government funding, and we need to generate more money, but growing the economy is another way of doing that. But I was very interested to see on Twitter, they've got this thing called community notes now, which I think, Twitter gets a lot of bad press, or X as it's called now. But they've also got these community notes, which are kind of their opinions shared by the community, which sometimes get attached to other people's posts. And all the Conservative tax cuts posts, there's a community note now which says the Office of Budget Responsibility states the UK tax burden will keep rising for the next 5 years, possibly to a post-World War II high. So, the big headline saying we're cutting your taxes is great, but we're close to the biggest ever tax burden, since the war as well. And I don't feel like, my taxes don't feel fair. I think one of the things that I'd really like to see the next government do, whatever political party, is completely reform the tax system as well. Because there were some graphs going around last week which basically showed that, if you earn £50,000, you pay, or £100,000, you pay a much higher rate of marginal tax than somebody at £160,000. So basically, the £50,000 thing is the limit at which you stop getting child, what's it called?
Tax credits.
Yeah, and so that drops off at 50,000, and then if you get to 100,000, if you're lucky enough to get that high, you start losing your personal allowance, and so you get these kind of strange blips where people who are paid relatively lower than some very high earners end up paying more tax. Yeah, and so the whole of the tax system needs to be reformed, yeah, and to change those things, and so it's a fairer kind of scaling, linearly scaling model, rather than just saying we're going to cut taxes when it's not true. So I'm not particularly convinced by that. I don't think anybody feels like their tax burden is low at the moment. Getting it a bit lower is probably good, but I'm not sure. I think people are sensible enough to know that there's an election coming up. They might get some temporary cuts now, but once we get into the next term, the taxes will go back up again. It's what's been happening across the last 13 years of Conservative government. So yeah, they're not the party of low taxes anymore, no matter which way they would like to portray themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's also like this lack of trust, especially in the Conservative Party now, given like many other scandals. But like, I think a lot of people do see this and say, yes, it's like, the few months. I mean, potentially the election could be in May 2024. So it's like cutting some of the taxes before in the few months preceding the election. And then, of course, depending on how the budget challenges look like, it's very easy for like any party still in government to be like, well, now we're in, like we're actually going to U-turn on our promises. So it is a very challenging one. There's some other interesting things in the autumn statement. I thought one of them that actually has a big impact on local authorities, especially local authorities that are promising and in their well, from a political point of view in their manifesto, but also who committed to the living wage, to paying staff the living wage, because the living wage is increased to 11.44. So like if you're
the minimum wage is increasing, yeah, but it's not the national living wage. There was quite a lot of tweets last week by the campaign for a national living wage, and it's not as the raise isn't as big as you'd expect if we are going to pay a national living wage. Is it a national living wage? What's it called? What, I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, that's how it says. It says national living wage increase to 11.44 for workers 21 and over. Yeah, because I know some councils are, I mean, including our general administration in the county, we said that we're working towards, like the real living wage campaign. This is the
All right.
national living wage, but this of course affects, like if you are,
Right.
committing
So
to
it's
pay.
going to increase to £11.44 from next April, but the
Yeah,
real living wage. So if you live in London, that should be £12. No,
yeah,
£13 in London,
yeah,
£13.50 in London, and £12 across the rest of the country, and they're putting up to £11.44, which is getting close to those numbers.
yeah.
Yeah, but not so. There was more room to increase it further, but you have to say we'd all support increasing the minimum wage as well. £11.44 an hour isn't very much at all, is it? Yeah, and so the economy has to be able to handle it. It's going to, putting those wages up will also possibly increase inflation a little bit, because shop workers are a big, and low paid people are a big part of the economy, and so it's difficult, isn't it? But I'd welcome it, but it could have been higher, I think, is the truth.
How about the alcohol duty debate? So alcohol duty is frozen. That is one of the big announcement number 7 out of 11 in the order of priority.
Whatever. Does it really make any difference? I don't know. I mean, alcohol is so expensive. It's one of those things that if you drink and you go into the pub, I could have told you how much of a cost of a pint is, but it costs so much money these days to drink that you just you hand over your contactless card and don't really look at the numbers. So does it? I mean, it doesn't bother me personally. I don't know.
Well, I guess one of the arguments is that it does support, like the pub industry. But I think, yeah, it's really interesting what is happening with prices and how much it varies now. Like if you go to London and Cambridge, I mean, compared to other areas. I mean, I was in Cambridge in a central area a couple of days ago, and I got a pint. It was £9. Like it was 9 quid. Yeah, I mean, this obviously never happens in, when I go in Huntington. But I think even the variation is like much bigger now. So like what I found, yeah, especially in London, yeah, I mean, it has increased like to a much higher rate.
Well,
Yeah,
look, thinking about that, yeah, I welcome it, because one of the issues locally in Huntingdonshire is lots of local pubs are
mm,
going out of business. Yeah,
yeah,
largely I think because of energy costs
yeah.
and
Because
the cost of living crisis, which means people don't have enough money to spend £9 on a pint of beer.
well, it's not 9 over here, but yeah, I mean,
No, but do you know what I mean? But it's still an expensive pursuit as well, and so anything we can do to support those guys. So one of the villages I represent, Worsley, have announced that their pub is possibly closing at Christmas. the pub in Great Gransden, Village Pub, is already closed. It's been closed since before COVID, and especially in rural communities, those are the hearts of the community centre as
Mm.
well, centre of the community, and so losing rural pubs is really difficult, really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm speaking about energy and energy bills. It says like up to £1,000 off your energy bills for those nearest new electricity infrastructure. I'm not even sure like what that how this affects me in practice. So but yeah, you get some money off your electricity bills if you're like near the new infrastructure.
So, comment from a user, and unfortunately, we can't see who that user is because of the way StreamYard works. Yeah, I'm going to take a guess at who it is at the end of it, but I'm absolutely for any kind of help to give people more money. But coming from a country that takes about 50% from people's wages, I find it confusing how people think that 12% can bring us anywhere. And I'm guessing that is from Daniela, who is originally from Germany, but I don't know. But that is the truth is that lots of those countries in Europe, in Scandinavian countries, and Germany have a much higher tax burden than we do, or it feels like a much higher, but also have better services and a better quality of life, I think. So there's a balance to be had, isn't there, between cutting services, cutting taxes at a time when we can't afford to deliver our public services is also an interesting question.
What is clear, I think, is that something is going really wrong in the UK in terms of public services. It's not only the kind of the constant underinvestment. I was so shocked to see, for example, there was this calculation by the local government association saying that Cambridgeshire has lost 2/3 of its central government funding since the last Labour government. So that is like a massive decrease. So yeah, because I was reflecting about this, like, when I moved to the UK, which was like over 10 years ago, I was like, oh, this is brilliant, like, everything's better, than where I used to live, like the public transport, the healthcare. And now, like, as I could see like this real decline in the services. And unlike the user in this comment, I come from a country with a very low flat tax, like on income. So I'm like, well, if you can manage to do like a like a decent job on like a small like kind of flat taxes, which is like a really controversial. We maybe should debate it one time, like controversial concept of everyone being like having this flat tax. I'm not sure if it changed now. Probably it did change recently in Romania, like a bit. They reformed a bit the system, but yeah, when I grew up, it used to be, I think it was 16% flat tax on income, I think at the time. And then you think about like, okay, how can like some of the services be not exactly the same, but like similar to like a country that is the fifth or sixth richest economy. It is just, yeah, surprising sometimes to think about, yeah, about that, especially if you think around like healthcare and waiting times, for example, and how people access
Well,
hospitals and things like that are very important to everyone. It is, or the lack, complete lack of dentists, like NHS dentists and things like that.
yeah, and that level, the NHS doesn't work at all, does it? That's frontline help. If you want to go and see a GP or you want to go and get your teeth checked, yeah, it doesn't work at all. And we have one former colleague at county council who confesses that she had to pull some of her own teeth out once because she couldn't get an NHS dentist and she couldn't afford a private dentist. And those situations are really horrible and like that. That's not the country you moved to 10 years ago. It isn't. Things are going rapidly downhill. And if you want a doctor appointment today, it will be very difficult to get one, and that's really really sad. And yeah, and as we get a decrease in national insurance, but the national health system is in massive terminal decline. I think that's something that really needs to be addressed by the next government, whoever they are.
Mm. Yeah, well, finally, I think that's like a topic we can debate maybe in a different session, the NHS and how I guess, how the health system compares to other countries and how it's funded. But the final one on the autumn statement, and there are a few more commitments I want to bring, was the investment in manufacturing, because I think that is something. I mean, it's 4.5 billion investing in manufacturing. I think that's actually like something that it is positive. It is really needed. Like, we do need to produce more stuff in the UK. But on the flip side, what I found really is not hilarious. It's sad, right? Jacob Rees-Mogg commenting about the immigration figures. I came out yesterday, and he was like, well, someone was saying, well, um, we have like increased migration numbers because all the businesses are asking for more visas, like in social care, in agriculture, because we still have those skill shortages, because we consistently failed to train to train properly sufficient enough people from our country. And he was like, well, if it's actually if it's actually cheaper to produce stuff somewhere else in a different country and just import it in the UK, fruit and vegetables. So like if you can just get fruit and vegetables from other countries more and just import it to the UK, that would be like better for him than having, you know, the migrant workers working on our farms here. And I felt that was like, I mean, the wrong approach, because and it felt surprising because as a conservative, surely he should encourage British business and not be like, oh well, we don't want to have those migrants working here, so like actually we're going to undercut British farming by just importing more stuff of potentially lower checks and quality from somewhere else. So it is. And also like in terms of course the environmental impact, so like yeah, we should just like fly more fruits and vegetables into the UK instead of yeah, or drive a lot of miles instead of producing them here. So I don't know if you have seen that, but I thought it was really interesting framing. It's like I support British business until it's about immigration, and then I'm like,
Which is madness as well, because I work for a German American company. You know, if you go to a London office, most of our employees are immigrants at the high end of the employment spectrum as well. Lots of really highly qualified engineers. And the truth of it is, I mean, you have manual workers where we can't find enough manual workers to get people into the country. And so, you know, getting immigrants to do those jobs is great as well. But at all levels of the workforce is we've got a skill shortage and we
yeah,
don't have enough qualified or interested British people to do the jobs. And so we need to recruit. And so that's one of the big stories of Brexit for me in engineering, is that people just left and went back to their own countries because they didn't feel welcome here as well. So, you know, everybody in our London office of the company I work for is Italian, is German, we're French. You know, there's more outside people than there are British people, because we don't have, you know, if you want to be genuinely compete on an international stage, you have to have the best people from everywhere, and you have to be able to employ lots of people. And so that's a ridiculous statement. Do entirely welcome the investment in British industry though as well, you know, especially around here as well. I mean Cambridge does really well, you know, in attracting its own investment, but Huntingdonshire and the other places in Cambridgeshire could do with a bit of a boost. It's one of the things we're really looking at doing as we write our local plan for Huntingdonshire, is to make it not about just building new homes, which we have to do, but also about bringing high quality, well paying jobs to the area. And that normally means in manufacturing. I mean, one of my big bugbears is that engineering gets a really bad rap in British culture. People think if you're an engineer, you stand in the factory all day working on machines, you know, drilling and lathing things. Well, it's like I've worked in engineering for 30 years and never once got my hand dirty. I sit at a computer all day and it's a really great job as well. So anything we can do to invest in those parts of the economy, and especially kind of developing areas like artificial intelligence and machine learning, you know, and automation, increasing the productivity of the British workforce is really important if we want to compete on an international stage.
it would be very interesting, like given the well, this is linked to the autumn statement as well, but like the Cambridge 2040 vision and Michael Gove's visit. And what I'm really, I know there are like mixed views on that, but what I'm really cautious about is just concentrating again, further concentrating all the wealth and jobs and yeah, business opportunities that come into it in one space, and then like creating, you know, kind of further exacerbating the inequalities across districts, but also within Cambridge itself as well. So I think any kind of, you know, massive growth plan as proposed by Gove, it is really challenging, because what happened a lot in Cambridge over the years is like it's brilliant, we have so many more businesses and business parks and companies, but in a way like kind of inequalities within the city have been widened over time.
And across the region as well,
Yeah.
as you know, like Fenland, you know, there's lots of, even in Huntingdonshire as well, but especially in Fenland, there's lots of deprivation as well. And so we need to, so for Cambridge, the Cambridge bubble needs to spread out and bring, you know, economic increases and social increases and better social conditions across the whole region, I think, as well. And so yes, in favour of all that. The whole Michael Gove visit to Cambridge thing is a massive can of worms. You know, people talking about forming development corporations to look over after Cambridge or Cambridgeshire, yeah, which reduces the amount of input that local councils have as well. Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. We'll have to talk about that another time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting given the, you know, I was recently discussing the City of London Corporation and how the councillors there work, that are, you know, it's not really a council, but it's like, yeah, it's really different. yeah, the people who are like on the City of London Corporation Council, or like, yeah, anyway, there's like a councillor function for that as well. So maybe we can discuss next time. All right then. I think that's it for today. We discussed a lot about the autumn statement, but of course there's more to discuss on this. So next time we're going to do other local politics topics, and of course about the Queen Edith's by-election. So do check that result out. That's really interesting as well to see some of the commentary around that. So okay, thank you everyone. We'll see you next week at 7:30, 7:45 a.m. or whenever we manage to log in. And have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Alex. Have a lovely day. Bye.